इस तरह की पब्लिक मीटिंग्स करती रहती थी पहले, और आप लोगों में से बहुत लोग जो यहाँ पे आज मौजूद हैं, देख रहा हूँ, you have been a part of those public meetings quite often. So thank you so much for finding the time to come, as I said. So today, I'm going to start off, but let me just quickly take you through the program that we have put together today. It's a very simple sort of a agenda. We will begin with Sunita ji doing a presentation on what she thinks about the issues that we have come up with in the State of India's Environment Report. Following the presentation, there will be an unveiling, so to speak. The book is officially already out in the market, but there will be an unveiling of the book. And then after that, we have a short discussion between Sunita ji, Anurita, and of course, I'll also be there. Following that, we'll open up the stage to all of you. Please feel free to offer your suggestions, comments, whatever you want to say. So, can I now ask Sunita to take on the
Thank you, Shuparno. Thank you. So thank you, Shuparno. As usual, I always need an extra help. So firstly, I want to join Shuparno. Is it all okay? Sorry, we are also live streaming this, and Madam Sukanya is the one who's always telling us when we get it all wrong. So I just want to join Shuparno in saying that, just jab bacche hote the, you had the sense of pleasure to see people. That's the same sense I have today. It's been just too long that we have not met, that we have not had a chance to just see each other. And I can tell you confidentially that we actually had a lot of worries when we organized this, because we haven't done a public meeting in almost 2.5 years. And I think the last meeting, if I remember right, Jagdeep, was when we did the food book release in Habitat itself. So we were really sort of, koi aayega ki nahi aayega, kya hoga, ab to Zoom ka zamana hai, so we really sort of really worried. And so I am so happy to see you all. So thank you for taking the trouble. Thank you for coming. It means a lot to see you all. And I hope this will give us more confidence to actually meet you more often and to do these meetings and discussions so that we have a forum. We can actually see each other face to face. So today, the meeting is to release CSC's State of India's Environment Report. And these reports have been 4 decades. And I can see Pallav here. I can see many other faces who actually have been part of this journey. I mean, 1982, we started with the first State of India's Environment Report, 1982. And then 1985, and I know a number of faces here, you were not even born then, okay? So we are really talking about the chronicling of India's environmental issues, its management, and of course, both the crisis, the challenge, and the solutions. But 1982 is when this gentleman, Anil Agarwal, and I want to give him a moment to remember him, that he is the one who started us on the journey of the State of India's Environment Reports. And I'll never forget when he wrote in his opening that he got this idea from coming back from Malaysia with another extraordinary Indian called K.P. Kannan. And they picked up this idea that this Malaysian Consumer Action had a small report called the State of Malaysia's Environment. And then Anil had this idea, why not India's Environment Report? And I think it was a report which kind of changed the way we all think about environment, because for once we got the full picture of both the state of the devastation, but also the importance of environment to the people who live on it. And the phrase that we used in the first report, which I think is so true today as well, that environment and development are 2 sides of the same coin. That environment is about the survival and the ability of communities to survive. So this really is our annual report on the state of India's environment. It tells you what is happening on the ground, what is working, what needs to be changed. We make an effort to understand the challenges, but also to try and understand what are the new approaches which are solutions for environmental management. Our very clear understanding today, after years of writing these reports, is that if the solutions are not affordable for large numbers of people in India, they will not be sustainable. And so that's really the benchmark with which we try and look for the solutions that are happening on the ground and report on them. We also understand people's action, because clearly without their participation, you cannot manage resources. As I said, environment is about development. It is about livelihoods and well-being. So what then is my take? I mean, as someone, I'm having the privilege of giving you what I would call a snapshot of the report that is in front of you, which I hope all of you will buy as well, because every time we sell a report, that money goes into our corpus. So here's a pitch and a plug for you to buy it. But the big take of the 4 decades, one, there is news to cheer. Let's be very clear that environment is today has become mainstreamed. When we started in 1982, the word environment was not even understood. Today, it is understood. Secondly, we are all outraged by how pollution is affecting our health, which means that there is a trigger for action, for solution that is there. We understand today what is happening with climate change and the impact it has in our world, particularly on the poor. And we also make the link between deforestation and increased poverty and desertification. So we have come a long way. Let us not underestimate the journey that we have come so that we can see change on the ground. But the bad news, if I was to give you a snapshot, is that we are not acting at the scale of the devastation that we see around us. So even though we are taking action and solutions are emerging, we are losing the battle unless we take much more deliberate steps at scale to reverse the damage. So what are some of the really bad news? I want to start with the bad news and then bring you to the good news, because there is some good news as well. So the really bad news is really the runaway emissions on climate change and the disproportionate impact they have on the very poor in our world. And these maps are from the report that tell you about disproportionate stress, and they tell you who was the most vulnerable in the world. These 2 maps, global maps, tell you the full story of this existential crisis of climate change that we have in front of us. We also know that we are close to tipping points. Yesterday, or a day before, we had the latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, very clearly telling us that we have run out of time. They're no longer saying we are running out of time. They are saying we have run out of time. And that's the really tough message that we try and explain how the tipping points are and what these are. But what we also have done is, and my colleagues have done an incredible job and a painstaking job in actually putting together a database on the extreme weather events in India and the losses and damages that we are beginning to see. This data that we have put together for you is from January to October, and you will see here. And the overall picture on this is 1 extreme event a day, 1 extreme weather event a day between January to October. Now, what do you mean by extreme weather events? That's defined by the Indian Meteorological Department. They say this is beyond what would be the normal variations of weather. This is extreme. whether it's extreme rain, whether it is cloudburst, whether it is hail. And you are seeing that today. You are seeing today the kind of devastation, weather-related devastation in our world, and the impact that it is happening even last week on the farmers because of unseasonal hailstorms in Maharashtra and now in UP and in Bihar. But all this is also showing up in the number of people being displaced from their homes. If you look at this data that my colleagues have put together from 2021, essentially what you find is that the weather-related displacement has increased more than the war-related, conflict-related displacement. So you are beginning to see, and that is why the question about the coping abilities of poor people to be able to withstand disaster after disaster and the crisis of migration, whether it is the impact on cities in India or whether it is migration as an external and a global hot potato, it is going to get even more exacerbated with the impacts of climate change. And the data on migration shows that so clearly today, whether it is floods, wildfires, drought, landslides, extreme temperatures, this is the kind of displacement that we have seen. The second big headline, if you may say, in terms of the bad news is, of course, the pandemic. And the link particularly with zoonotic diseases. So these are really the fact that we as human beings are breaking the barrier between us and wild animals, or even intensively grown animals in manufactured farms. And that really is an issue in terms of both the health burden that we are seeing today with the virus turning endemic, and adding to the burden of diseases. The third issue, or the fourth issue that comes out, third issue that I'm talking about the big bad news, is that we are definitely finding that the pollution deterrence systems, the systems and the accountable and the institutions of accountability are weak. We have done an analysis of the continuous monitoring system, SEMS, that was set up as a way to monitor pollution and to be able to have a better control over the pollution. We are finding that there are no quality checks. The system of environment and forest management, already weak, compromised, is further being chipped away, and it's not working for communities or the environment. Air pollution, we know, is increasing not just in Delhi, but in other cities of India. It needs check on the number of vehicles, on the use of coal in industry and in power plants. But the good news is, and I don't want to, small good news, but some good news, we are beginning to understand what thermal comfort is about. This is not just about air conditioners, but it's really about designing buildings so that you can make them more comfortable for human beings to live and therefore reduce the energy need. And that's where the guidelines are kicking in today, and we could see some difference. There are some trends that we should watch out for in bad news. One that really worries us is this question about a fodder crisis. It is growing, and we are beginning to see increased fodder crisis in the country because of the changes in cropping pattern. And that then has impact on the livestock economy of the poor. We are also finding there is a big question about intensive farming of livestock, which is increasing risk of infectious diseases as well as antimicrobial resistance because of the amount of antibiotics which are pumped into these intensive farming systems. The question of import of timber. The fact is we are beginning to import more and more timber because we are not able to sustainably harvest our own forests for productive use. So even though India has vast areas under forests, our import bill of timber is increasing every year, which means that we are either cutting forests from somewhere else or somebody else is benefiting from growing and cutting trees that we are using. So we haven't been able to build a timber-based economy yet. Forest ecosystems are threatened by multiple factors, including climate change. And I think the most worrying thing that this report really points out to is the crisis of extinction. The word extinction has been used for long, but now it's actually happening. In less than half a century, 2/3 of wild populations have disappeared globally. So we are a generation which can actually feel proud to say that we have seen extinction in our lifetimes. I mean, if you can be proud of that, if any one of us, including me, can be proud of it. But the fact is, it is happening. But there's also good news. And this is something that we need to understand, because there is not just something to celebrate, but as I will explain to you, this is the lesson in terms of how we move forward. One of the best news that we are finding is more and more cities are learning the art of becoming waste-wise. They're learning to do a segregation at source. A lot of this is happening because of NIMBY, not in my backyard, where the poor in our country are beginning to say, you can't build a landfill site in my backyard. And that is reinventing the system. But there's also much more learning, both at the government level, at the policy level, and this upscaling is happening in terms of reprocessing waste to wealth. The government policy today says that we want zero landfill cities. We want cities to take every bit of the waste and turn it into wealth. And that is why the whole program of turning household wet waste into CNG to run public buses in cities is very exciting. It's a completely new reinvention of the waste paradigm that we are seeing happen in our country. The same thing is happening with wastewater. We have built so many STPs. We have spent all our time chasing pipes, pumps, building the STP, looking at the health of the river, kitne sewage treatment plant bane, abhi kitne banne hain, kitta sewage aaya. The whole paradigm has shifted today. Today, government policy itself says that we need on-site systems to work, non-sewered cities, which means that you can take excreta from septic tanks, treated as the old systems, modernize them for the new India so that you can collect the waste, take it to a fecal sludge treatment plant by truck, not have to build your underground sewerage networks. Think about it like the leapfrog on cell phones. I mean, I am of a generation where when CSE was set up, I remember Anil sent me off to try and get landline phones. And I had to go to an OST who I will not name, but he's still there, an OST in the Planning Commission to sign off 4 phone lines for CSE. Today, all of us are connected because we've changed the technology. We've changed the route. So it's the same thing with sewage that is happening today, which you're saying that instead of using underground sewage networks, let's actually connect the on-site systems to treatment plants, which can then recycle and reuse that waste and make wealth out of it. So a change in method, a change in a paradigm of waste management is actually bringing you benefits. You can see in the state of Odisha today, where every city of Odisha is based on this on-site treatment system, where you are actually being able to monitor it in the health of the rivers as well. The other good news is something that my colleagues have put together, which is, we, as climate change activists, we're always looking at how do you decarbonize what is called the hard to abate sectors. But these are steel industry, cement industry, can't find solutions for it. But as you will see in the report, there are solutions. You actually have pathways in which India can double its steel production, which it must, and yet emit less than what it is emitting today. And the methods will again be different from the rest of the world. They will be about recycling, reuse of industrial slag, of waste material, so that you can actually reduce the resource efficiency, increase the resource efficiency of these industries. So again, remember, there are ways, and the best is that this is again a different pathway that we could take. The other good news is that we are beginning to see an idea take off where resilience through investments in regenerative farmings and forests is possible. There is more and more evidence that traditional regenerative farming methods work. We ourselves have put together a huge database to compare the results, and it is absolutely clear that these are good for the soil, water, productivity, and farmers. The big question is to make sure that farmers get the benefit from it. And that's the link that really needs to be understood and worked upon. We do not want these new farming methods to become elitist, where you and I eat organic food and the rest of the country does not. So that's really the big question, but it's possible. Another very interesting study that you will see in the report is really how, so my colleagues who work on antimicrobial resistance, the big issue is how do you reduce the use of antibiotics in dairy farms? The National Dairy Development Board has done an incredible experiment to use traditional treatments, preventive medicine, to reduce the use of antimicrobials. So again, possibility of a way moving ahead. Then there is much greater demand that we have found and reported for community forest rights across the country. Women are showing how they can manage forests for livelihoods. And this is critical because when we are looking at forestry, as I said earlier, we're really looking at how can you grow forests and actually cut them and then regrow them so that you can build a wood-based economy. And that's the big question that we have. And these are some of the solutions that are emerging. Some good news, but mixed good news is really the renewable sector, clearly growing, but we need to focus on access and affordability. Solar manufacturing is growing, somewhat wind is stumbling, as you will see in the report, but huge possibilities in offshore and repowering old sites. Hydrogen, of course, is the new buzzword, but the big question is to make sure that we have energy access for the poorest. Today, women still use chulas and dirty biomass biomass, which actually pollutes. And they do so in spite of a really incredible government program called Ujjwala, which was to take subsidy from the middle class, give it to the poor. But they are too poor to buy refills. So we need to make sure that the affordability of energy is absolutely critical. The other mixed good news that you will see in the report is the focus on e-vehicles. Clearly, e-vehicles important to improve local air pollution, to make a difference. But to make a difference, as we say, we need transformation in the public transport and paratransit systems. We cannot talk about e-vehicles as ikka dukka, ek do buses aa gayi, 10 bus aa gayi, 30 bus aa gayi, 300 bus aa gayi. You actually need a reinvention of the mobility system so that you can walk, you can cycle, you can take a bus, and the bus is run on clean energy. You take a metro. So it's an integrated, transformed mobility system. And for this, we really point out that we need a zero emission mandate so that there is a driver for change at scale. And this then becomes my final point to all of you, that what we are really reporting is that we are seeing the change. It is visible, but only when we have been able to act at scale. And that's critical. We need that scale. We need the imagination with the scale. Because the second question is, we have the reason why something has worked is because we have changed the method of managing the environment. Now that takes imagination. That takes courage. I know how long we had to fight to try and get on-site, non-sewer cities to be accepted. Because the engineering mindset is कि नहीं, जब तक पंप नहीं बनेगा और पाइप नहीं लगेगा, जब तक अंडरग्राउंड सूरेज नहीं होगी, तब तक आप कह ही नहीं सकते कि शहर आधुनिक है. So the courage to stand behind inventive, imaginative new pathways is critical. And the third is really the ability to be able to be accountable to local communities, to make sure that they participate in the management of natural resources. Three major issues that that determine the success of what I call that good news. So what then is our agenda? All our agenda of everyone sitting around here. One, I believe we need to keep pushing the envelope of change and push it hard. This is not a time for feeble-minded people. This is a time when we should be able to call a spade and to be able to suggest solutions which are transformative in nature. You cannot anymore, with the crisis of climate change, with the kind of things happening in our world, we cannot anymore think about small incremental steps. So that is going to be an important duty on all of us. Second, I think most important, the role that I hope we can all play more and more, and we do at CSE, track and report so that the truth is not hidden. But third, and most importantly, have the courage to stand behind solution. When something is good, say it is good. Because we are often find it very difficult to be able to stand behind a solution because we are so cynical and we've reached a point to say, nahi, kuch na kuch to gadbad hogi. So I think it's very important not to allow inaction to take over. And as I said, for that we need imagination. But the final point is, and this for me is what, for all of us at CSE, is what Anil always taught us, is that we need the politics of environment must not be neutered. That values of inclusion, of affordability have to be critical. That we cannot make environment into a middle class fad, which is based on techno solutions. That environment has to be about the politics of justice, of equity, and about societal inclusion. That is what Anil said in the first report of the State of India's Environment Report 4 decades ago. And it is as true then as it is today. The fact is, we cannot be sustainable if we are not inclusive. And that's something we have learned. We can give you countless examples of everything that we have understood in the 4 decades, that if you are not inclusive, you cannot be sustainable. But the final point is that we cannot work unless environment is really everybody's agenda for today and for the future that we call tomorrow. Thank you very much. So Priya, you'll switch this off. Should I just put it down?
do this. And I'm totally uninitiated, just out of college. And I thought, okay, so let me do my work. And I wrote everything about climate, geology, morphology, all that you need to know about a place. And he looked at it and he said, but where are people in it? And their connection with the ecology environment. So go to Arunachal, go to Sikkim, go to Darjeeling and find that out. And that kind of gave us, or gave me, a prism. Imagine those days without Google, without mobile, without the luxury to hire a car, but with all the tribals in Arunachal, you're going by bus from district to district, Bomdila, Dapurejo, Tawang, everywhere. And the insight that I got, and I understood that what you just said, that SO is about making connection. And that kind of became so clear to me. I mean, for the first time, it just struck me that in a state where about 90% of the revenue, they said at that point of time, was coming from the forest, the natural resource, then how do you invent an economy there which will work for livelihood, jobs, economy, and yet not lead to plunder of forest? And that's the kind of question that stayed with me, and what through the SOE process, we took that forward. And for me personally, when I came back from there, and so it was certainly a beginning for me, but very interesting, this particular strand and the connection that we were then making between natural resource management and the livelihood and economy. Stories after stories that unfolded up after that. It was quite a journey. And at that point of time, yet another assignment came our way, which was about, you remember Sukumajuri, that tiny grazier's village near Sugna Lake in Chandigarh. But that was also very interesting for us. That was the first time we saw the whole experiment from the officials that started to get the communities involved in conservation. But more important, the way the community came forward, and when they started the conservation and they started to retain the economic benefit of that whole exercise, that whole initiative, how the economic profile of the village changed completely from a rain-fed grazier's village to double cropping, multi-cropping, to income and all that. But that was a fascinating exercise for us. But all along, what it was essentially challenging us to do, the whole SOE approach, was to clearly make that connection and also change some of the established news values and the kind of notional ideas that we had about several emerging issues around that time. And another very interesting anecdote, therefore, that comes to my mind is about what you just said, Virappan. So, I mean, all of you know, I don't know how many of you really remember.
I think the generation changed. So
I know. This is all about sandalwood smuggling in South Karnataka, especially. And Virappan, the dreaded smuggler. And Anil said, go and find out and go to Virappan's village, And so the whole idea was that when Virappan and the smuggling of sandalwood was seen as a crime story, and it was being done as a crime story, we had to go and find the connection to say, why is it an environment and a development story? And that's when we challenged the whole governance around the sandalwood tree, which people call the government tree, highly regulated. And people had no right to harvest that, it's a highly high value product. And yet people had no right over it. So we went and we understood that the root of a lot of this smuggling was also for people's quest to gain from that resource, which the policies were at that point of time not willing to recognize. So in fact, deregulation happened after that. So that was quite a win. So as you can see that, so that's how the journey was evolving till the time I emerged out of the forest and plunged into the polluted city, you know. And but that again was a very interesting story. So when Anil one day, one fine afternoon, he called us and he had gone to get the PUC test done for his car. And he was quite perplexed that why do we do PUC test? What is it trying to
But
address?
remember, this is 1995. So please just remember the word PUC even had just come into our lexicon at that time.
And said that why checking the tailpipe of our vehicles going to clean up the air of Delhi or any other city? So that led us to yet another journey. And this time we were for to fight to finish. You know, we really had tested the blood then that, you know, you have to do. So it's just not about documenting, building the narrative, but also about trying to influence change. And so this was all part of the action research. And therefore, the whole campaign and the Right to Clean Air campaign that unfolded in CAC, that was yet another reinvention for us. And that's now quite a history, that how we had to fight the air pollution and the whole campaign, how that evolved, the Right to Clean Air, and the whole challenge to build evidence and data in the public domain. And when you had very little there in this country, when air pollution was nobody's agenda at that point of time. And therefore to go to the doctors and remember the lung pictures we got from Dr. Naresh Trehan, and which we had started to put out. So no data, but show the pictures of the lungs to show that what air pollution was doing to us. Okay, so, but that was yet another avatar of us, because it was just not about research and documenting and communicating, but now fighting it out on the streets when you were challenged. There was so much of resistance when the industry would, because that was a time when we had written about the engines of the devil, the whole diesel campaign had started. And we had put forth that what that was doing to our health and the CNG fight that all of you are aware of. But that also kind of now, as a hindsight, we now know that, you know, even today we are so impatient for action, but we have understood what it takes to move action.
But Anamika, when my voice is also...
Take this.
You can take that.
So we'll just move this. So, you know, when you're looking at e-vehicles and the point that I made right now, and I'd like you to reflect on that a little bit, because when I see this buzz about e-vehicles and every day there's something about e-vehicles now coming in, some company starting, some company, whatever. My question is, will you really be able to move the scale in terms of numbers, unless you do something as we did in CNG, which was get a mandate from the Supreme Court, which said that you have to convert all the vehicles into compressed natural gas by this date? Can you actually make that transformation with just the way that the market is doing? Because that's really the current thing. Let the market work and, you know, e-vehicles will happen. So some reflection on that.
CNG is a great example of that. And clearly we could move CNG simply because we had a very clear mandate. And the court has said very clearly that you'll have to do this, replace all buses, autos, taxis, and also set up the infrastructure. Today, when we are looking at the e-vehicle evolution, even after, now about since 2019, we have had the incentive for e-vehicles, the FAME program. But even after that, the market is still less than 2%. And we have no idea what is going to happen when the current incentive program comes to an end next year. With absolutely no long-term policy visibility, no clear target, no clear regulatory mandate given, it's not going to build confidence in the market, and the industry is not going to have its roadmap to make it scalable. So clearly, therefore, there's a huge learning from the CNG, and we need to do that. And the third, but the other dimension is that in India, as we have done as we are planning our e-vehicle policy, which is also to make it e-mobility. And therefore, there's a lot of focus now on buses and autos. But as you just saw yesterday, that Delhi is now acquiring a lot more electric buses. But look at the paradox. So you are now bringing more buses, but bus ridership is going down, right? So this whole ecosystem change that is also needed to enable and to make it supportive, that is absolutely critical.
Thank you, Anumita. Very well. So, Shuparna, if I may bring you in now. One of the things for us has always been the role of media. And in bringing what Anil used to call the snapshots, the small pictures, which then became a frame by putting it together. And the SOE was really about, and continues to be, about putting the small picture together to build the big frame. In your experience, because you've really worked for years now and built a network, a community of reporters, writers, and how do you see that evolution and that change?
Well, Sunita ji, the way SOE, if you remember, it sort of came to pass when it was not an annual publication. It's now very, very different from the way it was. We have stopped, creating it like a book, which used to be the case earlier. Now it's more like an annual publication. And from what I have seen, it is something which is very, very well accepted currently. And I won't be talking about only English media. It's a regional media which has predominantly actually used material content that we have seen. And in fact, this is a bit of a, something different that we are doing today. Normally, SOE, if you realize, is actually released at the Anil Agrawal Dialogue, which is a congregation of journalists from across the country who get together in our facility in Nimli for 3-4 days. We talk about SOE, we expose them to all the issues that the SOE contains. We bring in speakers from all over India and to talk to them about these issues. Now, that has had a huge uptake as far as, as far as I have seen. And what I have learned and what I have known is there are journalists, there are friends also here. I don't know how many have come today, but who actually look at the SOE as a kind of a source from where they can, take out material through the year almost. And that's a huge plus point for us as well, to be able to bring together all this information into 1 year. And I'm really happy and I'm proud that I have been a part of this. 2014 से हम लोगों ने 2014 से स्टेट ऑफ इंडिया एनवायरनमेंट को एक रूप दिया हम लोगों ने उसको, और उस पर्टिकुलर प्रयास जो हम लोगों ने शुरू किया वो आज भी चल रहा है, और आज इनफैक्ट it's far more powerful and far more stronger. And not only thanks to Down to Earth, of course, which is putting it together, but to all our journalist friends, all our media friends in different language medias.
In fact, you've touched on something very important. So for us, SOE really is about two ways of putting the information together.
Precisely.
One is down to earth, very, very critical, brings us the timeliness of the information, tells us what's happening on the ground, reports on what's changing on the ground, and that brings us the human face. And then is the researchers at CSE and other researchers across India who bring in the big picture, the perspective,
the perspectives,
the data, and that combination. And in this SOE, you will see we have actually created a whole data center at CSE, so that and my colleagues do an incredible job in putting together the data and putting it out in a way which is visually understandable, so that we can use data for informed decision making. So I think, Shuparna, thank you for pointing that out. That's a very good point. Thank you. So what I'm wondering is, I have 2 mics. I don't know, my colleague.
We have there are other mics as well.
Mics.
Yeah, we have.
I think we should open this up. We have so many good friends here, and we should. Yes, Jain Saab, I will definitely invite you first, please.
I'm A.K. Jain. I'm from the.
Just 1 minute, Jain Saab. can, Rakesh, one this side, so then thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunita ji. I had the privilege of working with Sunita ji in the urban sector, and she has been helping us in the preparation of the master plan for Delhi 2021, and she chaired the committee on environment and transport. So wonderful presentation, and it gives us a ray of hope in this era of Anthropocene. But the only question, which is, if I got it correctly in your presentation, you have advocated a kind of market for the good for the tribals, but it is subject to a lot of misuse. What is your take?
That's a question I'd love to answer. So, gents, just hold on for it for a minute, and maybe we'll collect a few more questions, and then we can. So, I remember that.
Yeah, good morning. Good evening, everyone. It is really a privilege and a pleasure to be here and hearing you on a very relevant and the need-based subject over here. I have one query, ma'am, or any one of you. See, we have actually made the ban on the public vehicle based on its life, say 15 years old and all that. Right? Is it the number of years of the vehicle which is important, or the kilometers traveled by that vehicle? That's my point, though the purpose of the today's convention or the report, this meeting is not that.
It's a good question.
We
Anumita
will
will
take
take
that.
it.
Say the 20 years vehicle, if it has traveled only 50,000 kilometers, how does it matter?
No, it's a very good question. Anumita will take it.
And
Any other question?
Yeah, I will add one more.
We will come here first, and then we'll.
See, I am not aware, and I have not gone through. Later, I will go through this environmental report after buying from there. You have a data based on the production, the pollution level per population or per unit area, because that's very important. These are my two questions. Good. And I will hand over. Thank you.
Can I just take the lady here? We'll conclude these three, then I'll come to the back, and then I'll come to you in front. Yes, please.
Yeah, so three very quick points. A lot of people are talking about e-vehicles, but we're not talking about the toxic waste from the batteries. We're not talking about how clean the energy is that you're using for your e-vehicles. We're talking about waste to energy, but we're not talking about the kind of plastic that is burned there and the harmful fumes that are not being monitored at the waste to energy plants. We're talking about lake restoration, but we're still talking about concretizing them without looking at the interlinkages and the catchment areas of catchments. So these are 3 points I want to flag right away.
Right.
Wonderful. So, Anumita, you have three questions to take. Let me take the wood question first of Jansa. So, if you're looking at modern architecture today and buildings today, in fact, all over the world, people are looking at the most sustainable building being the wood building. Because with climate change, one of the biggest challenges is going to be to capture the amount of carbon dioxide you have in the air and to be able to sequester it. And that's what is called the sinks of the world. Forests are so important for increasing the sequestration of carbon dioxide. So growing forests is critical. In our view, and this is my very strong considered view, Jansa, I think we need to define where we should not cut forests, which are our protected areas, our ecosystem, our areas which are very important for biodiversity. But what India needs is to move the pendulum away from just conservation to also sustainable harvesting, which means we grow trees, we cut them, and we regrow them. The problem is we are able to cut a tree, but we are not able to regrow it. And the reason we are not able to regrow it because we don't have the systems of management, which is why, as I pointed out, one of the most exciting stories is the story of community forests and how that is really putting trees in the hands of communities. But to me, the best building in the world would be the building that is built not out of metal, not out of steel, not out of aluminum, but out of wood. And I think that's the paradigm shift that we need to work towards.
Old vehicles. So in Delhi and NCR today, as you know, is because of the NGT order that there is a ban based on age of vehicles. And that could have been warranted by the level of pollution in the city. But nationally, and if you've looked at the policies that have come from the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, it's very clear that the kind of policy pathway they are looking at is that we should have systems to identify end-of-life vehicles or vehicles that pollute so much, what you call the gross polluter. Now, technically and scientifically, that is the way to move, but to be able to implement that, you also have to revamp your emission monitoring systems for the vehicles, and which has not happened so far. And the automated testing systems that are needed or on-road remote sensing monitoring that is needed are still not available here. So in the absence of the system, then the most convenient way to address is then to have an age-based approach. So that's where we are today. But we certainly hope that will improve. Then on the e-vehicle, you're absolutely right. The recycling and the impact of the vehicle, the batteries, again, the end-of-life batteries, even after downgrading them for the use, we have to develop systems in each and every city to be able to collect the battery and have systems and infrastructure to recycle them. Now, it's only a year ago that we got the e-vehicle battery recycling policy. And now the cities will have to focus on infrastructure. And we do have a little lead time now because e-vehicles are coming on the road now. So by the time the batteries are going to become recyclable, by that time, we should be able to put the infrastructure in place. So we have to move in that direction, and the ULBs will have to therefore notify and build the infrastructure. The third question is about the, sorry.
Lots of questions, so we will do some bilaterals with you. Okay.
Fine.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Just 1 minute. I have a lot of questions. So just give me, yes, please.
Good evening. It was a fantastic presentation. I'm Indu Prakash Singh. I work with the homeless people who sleep on footpaths of Delhi and other cities, And I must tell you that very early in my work, about 2000 and all, I remember reading a report from CSE which said that due to distance migration, there's lots of people coming to cities. And we use that report of CSE to say that, listen, the problem is there. Problem is the origin, But what I want to really ask here is that we have our governments at the UN talking about cities as engines of economic growth, cities as engines of rural development. You make conditions in rural areas so bad that people come to cities. And today, the problem is that about 9 shelters for the homeless have been demolished by LG using the NGT order to clear Yamuna banks. They want to have a Yamuna riverfront like Sabarmati riverfront. They want to do the river linkages and all that. So the issue is that the shelters we came out through High Court orders, the lobby about green and NGT and all were used to demolish the shelters, which was at low cost. One is housing wasn't provided at all. So the issue really is that at times the environment issue is counterposed with housing, and especially for the housing of the poor people and the homeless. So how do you see that? Thank you.
I think Anumita and I will both totally agree with you, because I find the best politics is to pit the poor against the poor. Okay. My biggest challenge, our biggest challenge has been to try and make walkways for people to walk, pedestrian walkways. And it's always about ki, are dekho wo vendor hai wahan par, vendor or walkway. You'll never look at the car and free up the space from the car. You'll make the poor fight the poor. And that's really where I think environment has to be. And that's for me and for all of us, really, environment is really about people. And we have to bring that idea back, because we do feel that environment today is slipping away. The issue of environment is slipping away and becoming far more technocratic, far more middle class centric. And we are losing the understanding in terms of, yes, we need floodplains. I'll be very clear. We do need to protect our floodplains. But we also need housing and affordable housing for large numbers of people who are coming into our city because they are being pushed out today. And these forests, I mean, the biggest issue, I don't know if you know this, but one of the biggest issues that is coming up in Assam and other parts is this whole issue about catchments of lakes. Because we did not protect our lakes, the catchments were not protected. We drove the poor into the forest, into the catchments. Now we are saying those catchments have to be vacated. So I think we really need to understand the crisis of homelessness, which will increase, in my view, and I see a lot of it when I go to the outlying areas of Delhi, because that's where the massive numbers of people live, that's where pollution is, and that's where you see the stress on cities as it will grow. You want to add something?
Absolutely. And you're so right. And today, when we are looking and we work on affordable housing sector, and what we have realized that we don't even understand the housing needs of the poor and do not even consider the fact that the poor is a very stratified income group. It's not that you can just make one BHK house for everyone. Someone needs night shelter, someone needs rental, everyone can't own a house. But we are not diversifying our typology and meeting the requirement. And the other, what is working against the poor is what we call the middle class environmentalism, the whole exclusionary urban development. Even though our policies today are saying that please do transit-oriented development, bring people to live closer to the metro and the transit lines, but make that mixed income. But we are not doing that. So this gentrification of urban space is also hurting the poor.
Ajay, you had a question. Yes, please. And then I will come to the front row and then I will go back to that side. I'm quite equitable and inclusive. So just give me 2 minutes. I've got some signs here. Center also. Okay, center. Yes.
I'm Ajay. I work with a farmers organization, Bharat Krishik Samaj. And we absolutely oppose converting food to fuel. What is down to earth's opinion on this whole green fuel stuff that government is incentivizing? And I have an idea that needs policy support. You talked about e-vehicles, but of e-tractors with replaceable batteries, which can be charged on the farm with solar panels. We've tried to do it, but there's no support. So maybe these 2 points. Thank you.
So let me take the first and then Anumita can take the second. On the food for fuel, definitely, Ajay. But I think what is exciting is when I see what is happening in Punjab, for instance, looking at straw being turned into agricultural, looking at straw being turned into CNG. Or I can see now increasingly, I'm very excited with the wet waste in our cities being turned into gas. But I have also, and I think, thank you very much for raising this because, you know, we have also been tracking the fodder crisis in India. And one of the things I am increasingly concerned about is that when we talk about the use of biomass for fuel, are we really going to take away the fodder from the farmers and for their livestock? And that is something that we are starting to, I think, you know, it's very important to keep looking at the big picture and making the connections. And I think one of the real question today is this severity of the fodder crisis. And we cannot make it worse for the farmers. So we will definitely, thank you for raising it. We will keep a more careful, nuanced, and a careful reporting to make sure that we do not fall into the trap of fixing one and then ending up with creating a problem at the other end.
Clearly, there is a lot of interest now growing in what we call the off-road vehicles, the tractors, even construction machinery is something that they are talking about. But certainly we need the product development. But in the rural setting, the way we are now doing a win-win, that even the irrigation pump can be linked with solar. So there's a conversation that if you have even the tractors on battery and linked to solar and decentralized mini grid system, that can be a big win-win. But clearly there is a product development pathway that we have to look at.
I'm losing control. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to collect some questions now. Okay.
Yes.
So Pallav, you and then you. अच्छा, आपके पास माइक है तो आप शुरू करिए. जिसके हाथ में माइक है उसके पास.
After me, she is standing. Okay, thank you very much, madam. It was an excellent evening today for the environment. I am Ravindra Joshi from Tata Power, and I am chair of the humanitarian technology in IEEE. My point is very simple, and I was expecting that when you present a report like this, what is the pie chart which is making an impact? Like to my mind, there's only rough figures that, the vehicular pollution is 20%, the construction waste is 15%. So that is what, is if it is propagated across the masses, then people will be, aware more. That is my point. Thank you.
Good point. I think Anumita will take that. Yes, yes, ma'am. Please go ahead. Yes.
Very good evening, ma'am. It's an honor to witness such a wonderful discussion here. Myself, Meenakshi from Ministry of Skill Development. So my question is that we are all speaking about carbon footprinting, carbon credits and everything. I think it's not just the responsibility of Ministry or of Environment or Forest to take the charge about the environment. I think it's the need of the hour that all the departments should take the charge about the environment, because I want to know how we can have a sustainable living with sustainable livelihood. Like you say, solid waste management or having a biomass creation from the waste we produce. So I just want to know how can we develop from as convergence plans from decentralized away from the home itself to the higher level, have a sustainable livelihood, ma'am. So
Very
what are
good
the
point.
methods for that?
Thank very good point. Pallav, please go ahead. I'll come to you. Ab 2 minutes mujhe dijiye. I'll come to the middle row. Just give me 2 minutes. I'm finishing this row first. Aap and then Pallav. Pallav, just wait for a minute. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I'm A.K. Merchant. Actually, we are gathered here when the United Nations is meeting on the World Water Conference.
That's right.
And it's happening once in 50 years time. So, and we recently had also on the water crisis and clean water and sanitation, SDG 6. So I wanted to know, perhaps I missed your opening remarks about the water. What is the water stress level of India? And what are some of the positive things that we can do? Because 3 years back, it was said that 33% stress, and now we are close to 40%. And this SDG goal, how are we making progress? The second is 2 months back, the Economic Advisory Committee of the Prime Minister released that social index report. Have you managed to correlate your data with the data in that report? Because they have got 809 indices for the states and some 410 or something for the districts.
That's right.
Whereby they have mapped and surveyed in great depth. So how are we correlating that data and your data? So I just wanted to know whether your survey report has considered that information. And particularly the water crisis, because we are trying to come up with alternative ways to deal with the
Yes, I'll come back to you on that.
Thank you.
Pallav?
Thanks a lot. Always happy to be part of SOE. I was there when the first one was done. Sunita, very simple, and I don't think there are many in the audience who would be able to answer this. Looking back at 1982 and looking back at 2023, is there more reason to cheer or is there more reason to feel sad? See, I'm a journalist, I'm a science journalist. I look at the snapshots, but I also see between that time when we were very sullen and sad about things, I'm going back to locations and I'm still finding the pristine forest and the pristine river 40 years later. So is there reason to cheer or should we feel very sad and sorrowful?
I'll take Pallav. So I'm going to, okay, yes, please. Why don't I collect some more questions and then we can, Shuparno? Anumita, just keep remembering the questions.
Sunita ji, is it? Yeah, excellent as usual. Delightful evening and informative. My question is that in human blood, microplastics are reported. Even unborn children, there are reports of microplastics. Still, there are no regulations, guidelines, standards, and there is no law doing this. And I feel this will be one of the real problems. We don't know what kind of health impact it will create on so many of us, including other life forms. If you can throw light on this.
Okay, so Anamita, I'll take water, I'll take Pallav's question, I'll take the plastic question, you take some of the others. She and I worked together for 3 decades, so.
You start.
Okay, I'll start. So on water, I'm not as despondent. You know, Pallav asked about this question about more hope or less hope. On water, I'm actually very, very hopeful. I just find water is the most replenishable matter on earth. Okay. And I don't see any reasons for us to believe that the next war will be on water and that water crisis will grow. I think what we have seen in the last 2 decades, and I think that's the question of hope, is that we have seen substantial new ideas coming in terms of how water management will happen. 2 decades ago, the only way we knew how to manage the water was to build large dams, reservoirs, and move the water. Today, we understand rain is decentralized, so is the supply of water, catch water where it falls. We also understand that water, particularly in urban areas, we take water, we return waste. So if you reuse and recycle that water that you get in urban areas, you can actually make water again. So there are, and then of course, agriculture. And Ajay is here, and I'm sure he will bear me out. I mean, a lot of water is about food we eat, but it's not agriculture, it's food. It's about the crops we grow. And I think the emphasis of the current government on millet is incredible, because millet is the most water prudent crop that we know. Okay? So I think there are huge, new ways we are beginning to understand the water challenge. And that's why I think I am not, and Pallav, to answer your question, I have my days when I can tell you there is bad news, more bad news than good. But in most days, I will tell you, we are getting more good news because we are getting more clever and imaginative in the solutions we are adopting. The more lazy we will be, the less effective our solutions will be. So I think that's really where my answers are.
And very for plastics, yes.
So I really, on microplastics, I mean, the fact is, critical issue. We haven't got enough data in terms of what it does to human bodies. So we need to understand that better. But again, on plastic management, I think, we are very critical of the current single-use plastic notification of the government, because we feel that's not good enough. It doesn't go far enough. We need a ban on plastic bags. We need much more regulation on packaging. The current extended producer responsibility EPR system is really, just neither here nor there. But the good news again is, and I'm going back to what Pallav said, bad and good. The good news is, so many cities of India have actually banned fully plastic bags. They're going way beyond even the central government mandate. And they are learning to do very intelligent segregation, processing, reuse of plastic. So I think, again, I can see that there are methods that we are finding, and we need to celebrate that. We need to amplify that. We need to stand behind it.
A very important question that you raised about, is environment only the responsibility of the Environment Department or Ministry? Absolutely not. And to give you a very interesting example, because we are so involved with implementation of clean air action plans in states, it's fascinating to see how now different departments are being challenged, because clean air action means multi-sector action. So different sectors, different departments, and they're forced to now think on the indicators that they have to work on, report on, to show progress. So I think we are getting there, maybe part of the little bit of betterment and good news that Pallav that you're talking about, but we are going to see that change happening. And the second element of your question, sustainable lifestyle. We are today talking a lot about awareness and how that is important to build public support for difficult decisions. Our decisions are going to get very difficult, but at the same time, when you're asking people to change their lifestyle, your walk, cycle, use public transport, that will also have to be enabled. And from that perspective, a very interesting thing has just happened recently. We have all seen the list of action under life declared by government, but under the Clean Air Action Plan now, the ministry has identified 14 action points from that, and they are going to link that with the performance-based funding for this year, which actually includes public transport, walking and cycling. So that will be a very interesting area to watch now. So yes, awareness, but it will have to be enabled.
Okay, I'm going to, sorry, just forgive
Yes.
me. I'll
Hello.
come to the center as the ending. I'm
Yeah.
now moving that side and
Yeah.
then I'll come to the center.
Here's the mic.
Yeah.
And my name is Subhash. Nice seeing you, Sunita ji, after so many years. And it was a lively discussion. So my point is very specific. We have discussed all EV, CO2 emissions, building, sustainability and all that. But the dust is the most important thing in India. If you go to in Delhi, I travel 360-degree in Delhi, outer the ring roads or outside 100. The dust is the most, one of the most polluted elements in the environment. And there was one report of IIT, Delhi. In 10 years I have seen, they said that 46% of the pollution in Delhi is due to the dust. And we do not have a scientific procedure to measure the dust. And
No,
this,
good question.
so second thing is, I'm coming, very important is the thermal power plants, where the chimney, outside the chimney, there is a 15 mg per meter cube is the limit by the CPCB. Now, what is the inlet is 150 as per the, I'm also consultant and in power station. It is 150 mg per meter cube. When I discussed with Shri Ram Test Lab in Delhi, they said they do not have any method to quantify that 150 mg per meter cube, because this, unless you, because I've found the dust is too high. Similarly is the problem with the fertilizer plants where the pellets are, the fertilizer pellets are there. It is huge dust. It is huge uncontrollable dust. So these are the unorganized sector side effects of the big industry where the pollution levels are not defined and put in black and white. Thank you.
Very good point. Yes, you have the mic.
Yeah. Ma'am, first of all, I would like to thank you for the persistent, consistent and diligent work you're doing for the environment, and we're all grateful to you as a nation. I'm Srinivas Kotni. I'm part of Bharatiyam, an NGO. We work on the ground for creating urban forests in garbage dumps and things like that. We have about 10 projects going on in Delhi itself. My suggestion, if it can be taken in as an advocacy measure, is to make it compulsory that each person in India plants a tree and then grows it till, I mean, in the entire lifetime, one tree at least. So at least we have 100 crores plus trees by way of legislative intervention. I mean, it's as a compulsion. That is one. Second is that you've been a part of the urban planning and master plan, etc. So we have planning commissions successively, outlays, etc. But the entire development happens concentrated in urban centers. We don't have a plan of all India development, 100 kilometers clusters. Smart cities is coming, but that is a different concept. So if that happens, all this exodus of people coming into Delhi and cities like this will stop. So therefore, these are suggestions. I don't know, questions, suggestions, whatever, you can take it in. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very good suggestions. Yes.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you for your passionate presentation and your effort into displaying the message of environment. I'm working for the French Embassy here in Delhi. And my first question would be, since you started to do those reports, how could you assess the impact of those information amongst Indian officials and the consequences of on the policy making? Secondly, how also these reports, which is like daily life people in India, to enable social change and behavior for the environment. And lastly, on a global level, how do you envision the multilateral cooperation to solve this issue on environment?
Oh, very good questions. Excellent. So let me, Anumita, let's take this group of questions and then we can move on. Rakesh, is there anybody at the back? I can't see the light. I can't see. So yes, please. Why don't you ask your question and then I will, we will take this group and then move to the middle.
Very good evening to everyone. And very much thanks for the wonderful insights which are useful and relevant in today's world also. I want to say that the waste is something which is, I think, genesis of all the problems, whether it is water or air or things like many other things. So in that case, waste segregation has to be more critically done. And a lot of waste segregation, other than wet waste and dry waste, there is a need that the glass, all other kinds of waste like whatsoever we generate in our homes, otherwise also in construction industry, because other person was telling about the dust. I think construction, unmanned construction and dumping of the construction waste at the places is also something which is creating a lot of problem. So if that segregation can be done more critically at a very, say, elaborate manner, I think that will also ease down on many problems which we are facing. So that can be included.
So
Thank you.
Anumita, will you take her question and the dust question quickly, and then I will take the questions from the gentleman with the French hands.
You know, when we had started our Right to Cleaner campaign way back in 1995, pollution in Delhi was often dismissed as a mere dust problem. But we do recognize the fact that dust is a huge problem. It's very unique to the ecosystem here. It's a very dusty environment. Now, dust in itself may not be that harmful, but it becomes harmful when it becomes carrier of all the product from the combustion sources to go deep inside our lungs. So we have to deal with dust, but I would say to deal with dust, just mechanical sweeping of the road is not enough. You really need to change the way we are doing the urban infrastructure, the greening and the urban forests that you're talking about, and the paving and all that, the whole range of things that need to be done, and the soil stabilization techniques that we'll have to adopt. So it's a much bigger agenda than just sweeping of the roads.
And also construction and demolition and waste.
Absolutely.
Now, I mean, I think you've asked a very important question in terms of the impact of these reports and how have we used these reports. I mean, I think many of the people sitting here will be probably a better testimony of the way these reports have changed the way people think. For us, it's very important to build perspective, to build data, evidence-based information that helps societies to take decisions. That's our role. And these reports provide that data, that perspective, which actually enables people to think differently, gives them the courage to think differently. Now, this is not to say everything will work tomorrow or has worked tomorrow or will, every piece in the report. But, I can feel, and I think I can speak on behalf of all my colleagues here, that we can tell you with some confidence that these reports have played a very important role in India in building the community of planners, thinkers, doers, activists on environmental issues. And particularly to keep the perspective, as you must have heard me when I speak, for us, the perspective, the politics is very important. It's not about environment, it's about the politics of inclusion. It's the method of making sure that that environmental management goal also helps us to deal with development, with poverty. So I think for us, that are the links that we hope these reports keep reinforcing year after report year with new evidence. On the multilateral issue, I think, please do read my essay. I've written about the complete breakdown of the global system today, and that you cannot have a multilateral system that works when the world is so polarized, so divided, and so completely lost and at each other's throat. You cannot talk about cooperation on climate change and on other big issues that should concern us. So I think we're at a very tough time in the world today. And we need to recognize the fact that on one hand, we have a planetary crisis, and on the other hand, we have a huge global leadership vacuum. And I think that's really for us where the challenge is. Okay, I'm coming to the absolute end of this. And I have, yes, you have the mic, so you can go ahead. And then, yeah, yes.
Hello.
Sit in.
So you're talking about solutions, and I wanted to discuss how are we planning to tackle such a lot of false solutions are also coming out, like about the smog towers and waste to energy. Waste to energy may not be the worst thing if we segregate. Because incineration needs to happen. There is something, some bad word about incineration is going on, but sanitary waste needs to go into incineration. So what do you feel about such false solution? How do you create such narratives? How does media and academics, they need to get involved in this? Also about the NCAP, recently we realized that micro action plans are also coming about, and nobody has access to those. So how do you feel about, like, I think I have questions for all three of you.
Yes, please.
See, I am a climate writer as well as I am doing some work in this field. I've written a book on climate change and I've given it to Madam. My question is that very recently there is a good news, I mean heartening news, that the government or the authorities are trying to make these climate studies or environmental studies as a compulsory study in medical schools. I think why medical schools only? Why medical universities, as they have, as the news reported? Why not at the school level? You see, you talked about this awareness. The awareness is very important. Luckily, we have more awareness than we had in 4 or 5 years back. There's a lot of awareness, but at the individual level, we need much more awareness. And in my book also, I have a chapter about which is called the climate warriors, in which I have given 65 examples where every individual can contribute. I mean, lesser use of plastics and clothing, and then energy, then so many things, that I have. And wastage of water, which can avoid. A lot of water is being wasted. So I think more awareness is needed. You have already said this. And what's your take on this? This thing that that the climate change or environmental studies should be at every level of education to make everyone aware about this.
Good. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you for that lovely presentation. My name is Anant Mitra. I'm an environmental engineer. The presentation briefly mentioned the promotion of decentralized solution for wastewater and fecal sludge management, and I am completely on board with that. However, I would like to understand that manual scavenging, even though there are regulations that are prohibiting it, still exists in our cities and our towns, very much so. And while the finance minister recently mentioned the availability of desludging vehicles in towns and municipalities, I would also like to understand places where you cannot take these vehicles. What are solutions to manage these decentralized solutions without having consequences on human resources or environmental resources?
Very good.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Okay. Yes, I can't see you because the lights are in my face.
Namaskar, ma'am. This side also. The two of us have a question.
अच्छा, मैं आपको लास्ट में आऊंगी उधर और खत्म करूंगी.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
आप पकड़े रहिए.
Yeah.
हाँ, yes, I have two people here. Yes.
Thank you for organizing such a wonderful event, which is extremely important for the time now. I am Nityanand from Pradhan. We work with rural people, rural women in livelihood domain largely. My point is that the impact of environment, the deteriorated case, the crisis is up now. It's not only in big cities that we more talk about this pollution of this air pollution. It's also impacting the rural people. And the consequence of farmers, smallholder farmers, poorer farmers who are actually having land in the uplands are also greatly affected because of the climate crisis, uncertain rainfall, heavy showers, dry spells. And we have to include those things. The way we are doing farming as of now, need to also revert to more agroecologically environment friendly or maybe some kind of a regenerative practice of a farming. So what I'm saying is not only going to address the crisis the farmer is going through, but also has a huge potential to reverse the environmental impact. So these kind of narrative is missing. I don't see much of narrative around that. So regenerative farming, the change of farming practices for the rural areas, for the poorer farmers need to be included into the narrative. So I don't know how much they've done, but probably I will request you all kindly include those as a bigger narrative in the whole drive of this environment aspects.
Very good point. Okay. Yes. Can you get a mic? Can you? Okay. She's got the mic. I mean, whoever holds the mic holds the key. So I'll let her and then she'll pass it to you at the back.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, ma'am, for another session, enlightening session, I would say, and your report as well. So my question is, like, every now and then we keep hearing about these 8-lane, 12-lane highways. So do you support such kind of highway development? Is it at the cost of the environment because everybody is pushing ahead for them because of the mobility issue that you've raised? That we have to get mobile and connect more and more places, like, and that too very, very fast, like within 3 hours or 2 hours, people should be able to reach the prominent cities. And the other issue that I feel is, like, for example, the Central Vista project, the RA project, like, environmentalists were strictly against them, but then the court verdict and many other political issues, you saw that the governments went ahead and did what they wanted to do. So what are the solutions that you see for such kind of a issue, which is very, very debatable sort of? Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
So yes, I have just 1 minute. I have that gentleman at the back. He's been waiting patiently. Just 1 minute, and then I'll come to whoever else has the mic.
Good evening, ma'am. Myself, Subhash. I just heard about your optics, the perspectives. Just my small, humble submission. Why this optic is still competing? Why it's struggling to survive with other optics. A lot of aspects are there for the other optics. Second, since last 1 hour, everyone is talking about the materialistic optics, bus, train, buildings. What about the cultural, ethical, economical value optics? You talked about the crisis, leadership crisis, global crisis, but we haven't talked about the opportunity. We haven't talked about the trust shift. We are discussing about the crisis, but the ethical value or moral optics, it's still struggling and competing.
Absolutely.
That's all about it.
Very well put. I had 2 people here. Somebody else has a mic I could hear. Yes.
Hello, ma'am.
Done? Sorry. Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes,
Namaskar.
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Namaskar, ma'am. My name is Neha Upadhyay. I run Vishwadeep Trust. We've adopted 8 villages in Ladakh. We provide them training in organic farming, solar technology, and water management system, which is called the Chorpan. So my question was that I've been working there for 12 years, and every year my heart breaks because the snow caps are melting. I don't have a great number to impress you, but every year, and in fact every quarter, every summer, you see a significant change. You see, like, many mountains, the snow caps are just, they have no snow. And there are many hydropower projects, dams being built in the Aryan Valley, which is towards Sham Valley, towards Kargil, and they have horribly failed. So timely supply to the fields and homes of water is a big problem in Ladakh. I would like to hear your take on that.
I think, we can't really add to that. I think you put it so beautifully. But yes, please. Somebody has the mic. I can't see you. The light is totally in my eyes, so I cannot
Now you can
see
see me, ma'am?
Yes, I can see you.
Good evening. Thanks for the wonderful evening. This is Rahul from Social Alpha. I want to share a particular observation from Chhattisgarh. This is regarding declining forest cover and biodiversity loss. What I have observed that as the income to the tribal communities or the forest dwelling communities are decreasing from non-timber forest produce, and their access is also being restricted. What I have seen that people are clearing forest floor for paddy cultivation, as there is a remuneration under MSP for that.
So how do we counter that, enhancing the livelihood opportunities, plus increasing preserving the biodiversity cover and the health of the forest?
Oh, I mean, I think these could lead to a completely new evening. So, what I'm going to do, because we do have real limitations of time and we will be thrown out of this place very soon. I'm going to start with Shuparno and then Anumita, and then I will give. I think we've had a really rich, amazing. I mean, I'm really realizing how much I've missed this. And we need to do this more, because we need to come together and actually just discuss things, not have an agenda, and just talk and share. And I think that has been so rich today. But I'm going to start with Shuparno on things he heard today, anything he wants to reply to, and then Anumita, and then.
Yeah, I would like to actually add to the gentleman's comment on the climate change, as a subject of education and erudition. So, I cannot comment really on what the government or authorities are doing, but CSE has a very vibrant school and university program, and we have very consciously and deliberately tried to include climate change and its linkages with various other, parameters and paradigms that we are working on in the things that we talk to teachers as well as students. And for us, that has been working very, very well. And I'm sure there are other organizations which are doing the same. Maybe sometime, in the near future, somebody will see sense and sort of move it on to the authorities' agenda as well. One is that. And just to add to what Sunita ji was saying, a physical public meeting, of course, can happen once in a while. But I think we are a very, very open and, we very receptive, so to speak. So please do get back to us and do reach out to us, even if it's not a public meeting. We are always available for answers, for suggestions, for comments, to interact with you. That's all that I want to add. Anumita.
Great. While listening to everyone, what struck me is a third generation challenge for SOE. The way the complexity of the issues are changing now. Earlier, you could say that I'm doing this for clean air. I can't do that anymore. For any action we are going to now push, it has to deliver on clean air, on climate change, on livelihood, on jobs. And therefore, how do you capture all that in policy action and push for that? That's going to be the big challenge, which means that we talked about awareness. So yes, awareness has grown about the problem, but awareness has not grown enough for solution. So therefore, the false solution that we're talking about can be combated only if we know what the right solutions are and build public support for that. And the third point that just struck me, even though there's a lot of gloom and doom, but also focus on the opportunity that India has. So even when we are saying that the cities are bursting under congestion pressure, we are dependence on cars growing, etc., but still the majority of Indians are still walking and cycling using public transport. And therefore, our opportunity is to intervene right away to keep them where they are. And that's the power of the policy action we need to see. When we are talking about the urbanization and the urban boom, to know that 40% of India that we will in 2030, 2040 is yet to be built, then we have the opportunity to see that we are adopting all the sustainable practices and the methods so that the new growth the impact of that is minimized. But just to conclude it, we just have to keep in mind that the speed and scale of change is now going to be really overwhelming. But that also means the speed and the scale of the solution will have to be even more aggressive.
So well put, Anumita. I mean, I think that's really at the core of it. And I think I just want to wrap up by saying, I mean, you talked about what's happening in Ladakh. You talked about the issues. I think, those are and somebody talked about false solutions, and you picked up on that as well. And I think that's really where we need to be able to just learn more on what's happening and explain it as it happens. I think what we are seeing in terms of the change today, the scale of that change has to be understood. And often because it's creeping change, it's difficult to document. But it needs to be documented because otherwise you will only understand it when the crisis is no water, no or drought or flood. We need to understand and capture that. And I think that really is also where the false solutions come in, where, every solution that will get advocated could also have a countervailing side to it. Let's be clear about it. There is no absolute truths when it comes to environmental management. Nothing is absolutely good. But if we understand what can go wrong, we can take action against it. And that's where, for instance, you talked about the waste to energy plants. I mean, clearly it is part of a solution, but the way it is being practiced today with unsegregated waste as a sort of, just go and dump all whatever is in there in the city, go and dump it there, and maybe you'll make some electricity out of it. And all the waste to energy plants today have become white elephants because they're not generating electricity. Now, we need to understand why not. We need to fix it. And I think that's where the role of information, data, analysis, reporting comes in. That's the richness of change as it is happening and our ability to be able to document it, but also to constantly look for where the kernels are of good news and solutions. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. I think
Vikas wants a photograph with the
book.
No.
I think with all of us.
Ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am.
Let me do it after I've finished. Just 1 minute. So anything else?
Ma'am, I will
yes.
ask a question.
Simply last word because I really need to wrap up now. Yes,
Okay,
please
okay.
go ahead.
My name is Deepak Kumar Pal. I'm preparing for IS. Ma'am, how do you analyze the reserve trade-off between poverty reduction and environment sustainability?
अब तो तुमने ऐसा सवाल पूछा है कि जैसे शाम शुरू हुई है, अंत नहीं हुई है अभी। तो ये तो किसी और शाम को मिलके बात होनी पड़ेगी क्योंकि ये तो एक बहुत ही फंडामेंटल क्वेश्चन है और इसका मैं आंसर 1-2 शब्दों में नहीं दे पाऊंगी। ठीक है, मगर थैंक यू फॉर आस्किंग दैट क्वेश्चन।
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So 1 minute, I have someone who wants the mic desperately and then I will ask.
हेलो, मेरा नाम डॉक्टर किशन शाह है। मैं फाउंडर ऑफ एंटी कोरोना टास्क फोर्स का फाउंडर हूं। मैं एंटी कोरोना टास्क फोर्स और मैम जो बात सोल्यूशन की बात कही ना, सोल्यूशन है हर चीज का, अगर आप करोगे आगे बढ़ोगे तो। थैंक्स मैम।
Thank you. So thank you everyone for coming. I think a big hands for all of us who came and stayed. Thank you so much for being with us. Really grateful that you all came. My colleagues who are here, really thankful that we could see the community that is around us. I think that is very important for us to know that you're there with us and that this journey has still a long way to go. Thank you very much. Thank you.
एक फोटो जो है आपके साथ, इसको बंद कर